First up here, we've got Case of the Shattered Pact. Which, enchantment, when this case enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, 2 colorless. And then as to solve, there has to be 5 colors among permanents you control. If unsolved, solve at the beginning of your end step. And then once it's solved, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains flying, double strike, and vigilance until end of turn. So this is me going in completely cold. I haven't read anything about the new mechanics as far as these like solving cases go. So there's a couple of questions that I have, like, um, does it remain on the battlefield once it's solved, so that it just continuously triggers every single time? Um, that kind of affects whether or not it's good. So 2 colorless to search your library for a basic land card, though, is decent enough fixing if that's something that you care about. And I'm not sure exactly. I haven't looked at the mana or anything, so 5 colors among permanents you control, kind of interesting. I'm gonna give this one a C. So just to clarify, the kind of ranking of everything goes like A is a or S is like an absolute busted bomb. A is a absolutely busted bomb, but slightly lower. B is like what you want the majority of your deck to be. C is kind of filler, and then D is situational or bad filler, and then F is unplayable. So I think I'm going to give this one a C. I can see it going into a lot of decks as long as like the clue thing is kind of a mechanic for the set. So let's see here. Then we got Absolving Lamasu. Is a 4/3 flyer for 4 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, all suspected creatures are no longer suspected. And so that's another mechanic that we'll have to figure out what that is. When absolving a Lamasu dies, you gain 3 life and suspect up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. A suspected creature has menace and can't block. Okay. Well, I mean, a 4/3 flyer for 5 is okay. Moving suspect, be interesting to see how important that is. And then gains 3 life when it dies. Makes it so you remove a blocker, but you give something this. It's a little bit advantageous if you're the attacker. If you're on defense, this sucks a little bit. I guess it removes your opponent's suspects, so that could kind of remove some of the menace. Get the 4/3 flyer. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give this one a C. I think this one's kind of. I'm not super happy to open this up as one of my uncommons to like go into white. You gotta assemble the players. Enchantment for 1 and a white. A look at the top card of your library anytime. Once each turn, you may cast a creature spell with power 2 or less from the top of your library. Okay. So as long as there's a power 2 or less thing going on, that's pretty good. Being able to get additional dig. Once you've played all of your 2-cost creatures or whatever, you can run out of gas really quick. So this lets you potentially play a whole bunch from the top of your library. I think this is pretty good. I'm going to give this one a B. I think this is one that, like, at least pack one, pick one, build around. Aurelia's Vindicator, 2 double pip white, flying lifelink ward 2. Disguise X, 3 and a white. When Vindicator is turned face up, exile up to X other target creatures from battlefield and or creature cards from graveyards. And then when the Vindicator leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hands. Oh, cool. So they don't even come back to the battlefield? So to start off, you get a 4/2, which is a little bit weak, but a 4/2 flying lifelink ward 2 for 4 is very doable. Double pip white is going to be making it a little bit hard to put it into additional decks other than just white decks. Sky's mechanic, I'm guessing, is kind of like the morph mechanic, where you can flip it for X and 3 and a white, so it's very mana intensive. I'm also going to give this one a B, just because of the double pip white. I could see this being a card that you'd want to pick up anytime that you open it, which is kind of what I reserve A's for. If it had a single pip white, but I think the disguise cost is going to be too expensive for limited applications. I guess for 6 you could exile 2 things and then get a 4/2 flyer and get the lifelink flyer. Kind of an interesting one. I'm going to go with my gut and say that's a B. That might be undervaluing it. Auspicious Arrival is 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and investigate. Okay, so you create a clue token if it's an artifact. It's an artifact that has 2 colorless. Sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. So combat trick +2/+2 for 2 is a little overstated, but you get a clue token, which has been impressive in the past, especially in limited. So combat trick, usually I want to start combat tricks down a little bit low and then come up on them once I figure out what the spot removal at instant speed is looking like in the set. So I'm going to give this one a C. I think the investigate is enough to kind of bump it up from where I'd usually start off with kind of a D. Paula's Surprise Witness, 1 and a white, sorcery, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a flying counter on it. It's a spirit in addition to its other types. Okay. So the issue with these cards in the past has been how easy it is to self-mill. Because if you have nothing in your graveyard, then this is a do nothing in your hand. And so the flying is very intriguing, though, and this will depend on how many mana value 3 or less things that you have that are just absolutely busted. But to start, I'm going to give this one a D. I don't like cards that don't do anything until later. So we'll see. It might be too low on that one. All right, so this is one of the ones I was talking about that has like we know the card, but it's not been fully released yet. So we're going to call this one the Lenny Briscoe Superfan. And when it enters the battlefield and whenever you solve a case, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an enchantment card from among them and put it into your hand, and then put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. And then you may use mana as though it were mana of any color to cast case spells. So there kind of feels like maybe there's going to be a multicolored case deck. You get a 1/4 human detective for 2 and a white. So don't think I'm very excited about this unless I'm in a case deck. So it's a 1/4 that draws a card if you have enough cases. So I'm gonna go with the D at the beginning here because I don't know how many cases there are gonna be. And then we have a case of the Gateway Express, which is 1 and a white. When this case enters the battlefield, choose target creature you don't control. Each creature you control deals 1 damage to that creature. Interesting, okay. And then you get to solve 3 or more creatures have attacked this turn. And then if unsolved, solve at the beginning of your end step. So if you attack with the 3, then at the end step you get to have it solved. And then when it's solved, creatures you control get +1/+0. So I'm thinking these enchantments are permanent. So once they're solved, they're not going away. Which makes your future attacks better. And then it's also removal. So as long as you're doing the go wide, it's X damage to a single creature, where X is the number of creatures that you have. And notably, each creature does deal the damage, so that's going to work with Death Touch. I assume there's going to be support for this, so I'm going to give this one a B. Feels like one of the, that seems like a pretty decent case card. Case of the Pilfered Proof. 1 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever a detective enters the battlefield under your control, and whenever a detective you control is turned face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then to solve, you control 3 or more detectives. And once solved, if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a clue token are created instead. Okay. So I imagine the detectives are coming in with clue tokens. So if it creates a clue token, you get 2 additional clue tokens because you get an additional clue token. Okay. Interesting. So it depends on how much detective there is as a creature type in the archetype here. So white detectives in white case. Interesting. I'm gonna start this one off with a D because it's specifically a build around. Like it's obviously going to be higher if you do have the detectives, but without knowing how many detectives are in the set to start off here, I think I'm going to start it off with a D because it doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield. Doesn't even it doesn't even if you have the detectives, it's a little bit slow. And then eventually gives you some additional value. So it's kind of like mid-range detective deck. Yeah, I'm gonna go with situational on that one. Case of the Uneaten Feast. Interesting. All right, so Case of the Uneaten Feast is a enchantment for 1 white. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Solve, you've gained 5 or more life this turn. And once solved, sacrifice this case. Creature cards in your graveyard gain. You may cast this card from your graveyard until end of turn. Okay, yeah, so this one, it allows you to sacrifice the solved enchantment to replay stuff from your graveyard. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So like a Soul Warden effect. Well, but one-sided. I don't think you need to necessarily flip this. I think this is fantastic. You just put this down at turn 1, and now whenever your creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life, and you don't even need to solve it. Man, okay, I like this one a lot. And a single pip white. I'm gonna give this one an A. This is gonna be my first A. This is like better Lunark Veteran. Yeah, exactly. 64-bit Link. Hope you're having a good day. Yeah, because it's like harder for your opponent to remove and giving you the Lunark Veteran effect. Very excited about this one. That's cool. Okay, so we've got some good case cards. That one was at rare. Defenestrated Phantom for double pip white. Flying Disguise for and a white. May cast this card face down for 3 colorless as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2. Turn it face up anytime for its disguise cost. Okay. So flying 4/3 for 6 is definitely understated, but reasonable. Flying, it depends on how weak the set is to flyers. Like a 4/4 for 6 usually tends to be kind of okay. But double pip white, that's kind of rough. It depends on how much of a disguise theme there is in white specifically, and being able to pay 5 mana to flip it into a 4/3 instead of a 2/2 isn't that great as far as snagging something. So I'm going to give this one a D for now. Maybe I'd come up on it once we figure out how much of the disguise theme is actually good. All right, Delny, Streetwise Lookout. This one has got some people's attention for constructed purposes. 2 and a white, you get a 2/2 legendary human scout. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. And then if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Oh boy. And so it's ETBs and death effects, like as long as you're doing the power 2. And okay, so this one is I'm pretty excited to pick this up and go into that strategy. I'm not sure every deck is going to want it though, because it's a little bit of a build around. If you're not doing the power 2 or less thing, then you are playing a 2/2 for 3, which is understated. And then it depends on how many good abilities of creatures you control power 2 or less, right? So I'm gonna give this one a B. I think it's enough that like if I open it up in the pack that I'm like, okay, let's try to do the power 2 or less thing. But I don't think it goes into every deck. Doorkeeper Thrall, a 1/2 flash flyer for 1 and a white. I like that already. And then we've got artifacts and creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Ah, answer to the rare we just looked at. Interesting. Okay, so 1/2 flash flyer that you can do in response to somebody playing a creature that's going to have a good ETB. Well, I like that a lot. And I think the 1/2 flash flyer is decent enough. You can flash this in to eat a 1/1. Depends on how many 1/1 tokens there are in the set. Might be overvaluing this one a little bit, but 2 cost makes it a little bit less splashable. Well, I'm gonna go with a B on that one. I don't think that like you're gonna want to pick it up outside of white, right? But that seems like if I'll give that one a B. It seems definitely playable. And then we've got Due Diligence, which is an enchantment for 2 and a white. Enchant creature When Due Diligence enters the battlefield, target creature you control other than enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and gains vigilance until end of turn. And then enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has vigilance. Interesting. So you get an effect the turn that you play it. And but the problem here is if they problem with any enchant creature thing is if they instant speed removal it, it's a 2-for-1. So +2/+2 and vigilance on two things though. That's a fair amount of power. I'm gonna give it a D though, till I know more about the instant speed removal. These are cards that I usually tend to avoid. Essence of Antiquity, we've got a 3 double pip white for an artifact creature golem that is a 1/10, and it has disguise for 2 and a white. When Essence of Antiquity is turned face up, creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn and untap them. For 3? Oh, hell yeah. Okay. I like this one a lot. So you pay 3 colorless for a 2/2 creature with ward 2, assuming you like to do the disguise thing. And then for 2 and a white, you flip it up to in response to eat one of your opponent's removal. And it's a 1/10, so it's basically going to be able to block whatever your opponent's doing if you're like trying to gum up the ground and win in the air. The ward 2 is going to be really interesting to see how it plays with Morph. One of the downsides with Morph in the past was the 2/2 creatures were very prone to removal. Yeah, I agree, Link. I think there's pretty it's pretty obvious why they brought back cons, right? And for Ravnica remastered on Magic the Gathering Online. Hey, Saunders, how you doing? Do these auto solve at the beginning of your turn? Sorry, I missed your comment there. The case has a condition that, if solved, is solved at the end of your turn. So, like, if we go back to one of the cases, so this right here, if unsolved, you solve at the beginning of your end step. So if you've gained 5 or more life in your turn, and on your end step, it then becomes solved. So because it's your end step, you wouldn't be able to actually sacrifice this to play the creature cards in your graveyard until the following turn, unless they're like flash creatures. Hope that let me know if that answers your question. Yeah, so this one, it isn't super overpowered or anything, but I do think that it's enough that I'll be interested in picking it up, as long as the disguise is something that white wants to be doing, and we've seen disguise already, so it's not an off-color kind of theme. And I like these cards that are, just like Cons of Tarkir, you can play them for free and then later flip them, and that disguise cost is relatively low. So I like that as well. You're gonna have this kind of like protect your thing if they pay the ward. Uh, Really curious. The disguise mechanic is gonna inherently make things mana intensive if you are doing that mechanic. So another thing to keep in mind that kind of leans towards 17 lands. And this one I love the name, that like the unofficial name. So it probably is going to be called, because like Familiar del Foro, I think is Hamcat. But like it's got to be a little bit off, right? So anyway, we get a 1/1 for 1 that is a creature type cat for 1 white, and it has disguise 1 and a white. And when Hamcat is turned face up, return another target permanent you control to its owner's hand and put a +1/+1 counter on Hamcat. So you can play this out as a 1/1, just for 1, if that's something you're doing. And then if not, you can pay it for 3, and then you can flip it up and return something that's going to die, or return, in response to something getting targeted by removal, and then you can make it into a 2/2, which it already was. So it loses its ward. Kind of interesting. So, um, there's also some really interesting ETBs we've already seen. So being able to flip this up and then get another ETB, whether it be from an enchantment or from a creature, allows you to kind of do that while not really losing that much of a cost. Okay, I'm gonna give this one filler. I'm gonna give this one a C. If you're doing the disguise thing, I'm not sure I pick up the familiar and before I'm in disguise and be like, yes, I've got it. So but it definitely goes up in value the more ETPs that you have. Griffknot Tracker. Um, see, wait. In paper and modern, having two different ways to play cards upside down is going to be obnoxious. Oh, you with the previous morph cards? I mean, they kind of give away information though, because one will have ward and one won't. So like the creatures that are upside down that have ward 2, come from the murders at Karlov Manor, right? So that'll at least kind of help navigate that space a little bit, the morph versus disguise. Yeah. Griffknot Tracker is a 3/2 flyer for 3 and a white. And when Griffknot Tracker enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Well, so a 3/3 flyer for 4 is okay. I do think that there's enough self-mill stuff. So one of the mechanics of the set is by exiling stuff in your graveyard. I can't remember the name of it yet, but the attacking the graveyard can be useful, and a 3/2 is a little bit understated. You'd rather see a 3/3 flyer for 4, but I think this is justifiably doing enough that I'll give it a C. Think of it, if I'm in white, it's a flyer, it attacks the graveyard. Depends on it could, it might go down on this if there's a whole bunch of X2 hate. But I think this looks okay. We've got Hazda Vigilante, which is a 4/4 giant soldier for 4 and a white. When Hazda Vigilante enters the battlefield or attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control with power 2 or less. Interesting. So power 2 or less shows up again, which, by the way, the card before works. This one works with the power 2 or less strategy. When this enters the battlefield or attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control power 2 or less. You can continuously grow it, but only up to 2 power, right? Once it's at power 3, you can't put another +1/+1 counter on it. And a 4/4 for 5 is understated. All right, we'll have to see how much this leans into the power 2 or less theme. I think this is going to be filler, a C in the power 2 or less deck. I don't think you're going to want it in most white decks, though. So I'm going to give this one a D. Inside Source, we've got a human citizen for 2 and a white. You get a 1/1. And when it enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. Okay. Well, we've seen stuff that you can already do for, with the ham cat, for example. So creatures with interesting ETBs, you can bounce, get additional value out of them. A 1/1 that spawns a 2/2 when it enters the battlefield has been a solid card in the past. There's detective synergies as well. And then we've got a clue here that Azorius is the one doing the detective theme. Got 3 colorless and tap it. Target detective you control gets +2/+0 and gains vigilance until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So after you've done it, you've also got a mana sink that you can do to up your damage. You have to do it before combat, because it is at sorcery speed, but it gives you something to do. So I like this, especially because we've already seen some go wide synergies and power 2 or less synergies. So I'm going to give this one a B. I think that my first impressions here is that this is going to be a nice common look to pick up like 5 and onward. KARLOV Watchdog, we've got a 3/2 dog for 3 and a white with vigilance. Permanents your opponent's control can't be turned face up during your turn. Okay, so no flash, getting rid of disguise. Interesting. And then whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So a board pump in an understated creature, vigilance. Okay. This is doing some interesting things. Okay. KARLOV Watchdog. If this was a hill giant, if this was a 3/3 for 4, it would be more interesting. It is a 4/3 for 4 if you have 3 or more creatures that are attacking. So you're definitely going to want to go wide strategy, though. Otherwise, you're playing a very weak hill giant. And there is some hate with the permanents your opponents can't, flip face up during your turn. It's kind of cool. But it's also play versus draw dependent, because if you're playing behind, then this is a really bad blocker. So I'm going to give this one a D. And if it might go up to a C or even a B if you're in the go wide deck in the set. Krovad Haunch is a artifact food equipment for 1 white. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has an equipment cost of 2. You can sacrifice it to gain 3 life by tapping 2 colorless and tapping it, so it's a food. And then when it is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a white to create 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens. Okay, interesting. So is there a dog deck? Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and an equipment cost of 2 is not particularly good. I like my equip cost to cost 1 because that really adds up throughout a match. But the fact that it's a life, for 4 you get 2 1/1s and create 3 life. I'm almost thinking this is almost as not an equipment. Would I just be fine playing this for 5 mana to gain 3 life and create 2 1/1s? Not really. But you know, I might be undervaluing this. I tend to undervalue cards like this a little bit off the get-go. I'm going to give this one a D. I don't think I'm interested in the equipment, at least not without additional equipment synergies. Make your move. 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with power 4 or greater. Hey, what's up, Arthal? Seems flexible. Yeah, there's some flexibility in it, and you don't have to pay it all at once, right? It's 5 mana to do the whole shebang, but kind of split up. And if there's a way to get it into the graveyard without having to sacrifice it for the 3 life, paying 2 to get 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens is kind of fine, right? So, you know, like kind of think about like Tinker's Totes. This is 3 rectangles in 1. So if you're in the rectangle deck, then this has some good synergies. Make your move, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with power 4 or greater for 3. I'm going to give this one a D. There tends to be better removal. The problem is that if you're playing against the power 2 deck, then this is just a dead card in your hand. In best of 3, it makes a really good sideboard, though. If you're up against one of the bigger mid-range decks, then tend to be an okay card. But assuming you're playing best of 1, I'd look for other types of removal. Makeshift Binding is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Makeshift Binding leaves the battlefield, and you gain 2 life. Okay, so this is kind of like the O-ring, but it only can target creatures instead of any permanent. No restriction on the creature that it can exile, and you gain life by playing it. And we can blink it if we want to change the target. We've seen some stuff already in that kind of category. So this tends to be really good removal. Free of anything. It depends on how much enchantment hate there is. There's no ward or anything. But even if they're doing like a disenchant for 2, then you're only losing 1 and 1 mana, and you gain 2 life, which is close to worth 1 mana ish, maybe half a mana. So I'm gonna give this one a B. I think this is another one that I'm gonna be looking to pick up in the white common slot. Market Watch Phantom is a 2/2 spirit detective for 1 and a white, and it's got the blue to kind of give you the hint that it's for the blue-white deck. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, Market Watch Phantom gains flying until end of turn. Well, 2/2 flyer for 2, and assuming the detectives are all 2 or less power, this is very appealing. Is it appealing enough for me to give it a B? I'm gonna go with yes. So Grizzly Bears, I tend to be fairly high on Grizzly Bears anyway, and so like I like a 2/2 for 2, unless the new standard is a 2/3 for 2, like we saw in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Uh, Being able to give a evasive, as long as you are playing the 2 or less theme, I think will fit well into the detective deck. So I'm also gonna at least flag this one as a common to come back to and give it a B. Got Museum Nightwatch, which is 3 and a white for a Centaur Soldier. 3/2. Another one that's not even a Hill Giant, man. Got these 3/2s for 4. When Museum Nightwatcher dies, create a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token, and then it has Disguise for 1 and a white. Okay. It kind of wants to die, which is why it's got a low Disguise cost. So you play out a 3/3 2/2. You play out a 2/2 ward for 3. and then you turn it into a 3/2 that might trade up with something, and then you get a 2/2 out of it. I think that's a lot to justify a 2/2. I'm gonna give this one a D. I'm not super stoked about it. I might be undervaluing the disguise mechanic though, and it is 2 cards in one. But like, I'd rather just be playing a 4/4 on 4 that nullifies both the 3/2 and the 2/2. So, not super stoked about that one. Neighborhood Guardian is a 2/2 unicorn for 1 and a white. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I'll give this one a C. I think that it's not as good as something getting flying, right? But turning your 2/2 into a 3/3 is good for the aggressive decks. As long as you're doing that thing. I like this Grizzly Bear. It seems like a decent 2-drop. No witnesses, 2 double pip white for a sorcery. Each player who controls the most creatures investigates, then destroy all creatures. Hey, so we've got a Wrath of God. All right. And it comes with an investigation if you control the most amount of creatures. Usually don't want a Wrath when you're ahead on the board, though. Well, Wraths tend to be worth playing. You know, your opponent doesn't see it coming. You gain the advantage of not playing into your own Wrath. So I think this one's an A. I think this is a fine one to. I mean, Wraths tend to be powerful enough that I want to pick them up. The double pip in white is going to make it just not go into every single deck. So maybe an A is too high. Yeah, no, actually, I'll give this one a B. I think that like it's a card that you want. It's a card that's going to like set you in that direction. But I'm not sure I'm going to pivot for it. Like, let's say the in pack 2 pick 1 you open up no witnesses, do you just like drop everything and go white? Maybe. Rats tend to be pretty good, especially if there's a lot of board centric strategies. So it might be too low, but I'm gonna go with B. I'm gonna switch it to from an A to a B, so like a B plus. We've got Not on My Watch, which is an instant exile target attacking creature for 1 and a white. This is a good defensive card and is okay if you're racing in the air, right? So if you think about like Quicksand Whirlpool and Lost Caverns of Ixalan, if you're trading blows with your opponent, this is good. If you are the beatdown and your opponent is never attacking you, then this is a dead card. So I tend to like these fairly high, though. Having a dead card when you're ahead is not as bad as having a dead card when you're behind. So I'm going to give this one a B. I think this is the kind of removal I'm going to be looking for. Hey, what's up, Link? Or, not what's up, Link. Exactly, Link, right? The one thing Standard needed more is board wipes. Got another Wrath. I mean, there tends to be a Wrath in every set, right? At least it's not like a Sunfall. It's not exiling anything. It's it's at least just like an old school, like it's like Depopulate, right? And you get an Investigate. It's very similar to Depopulate, where Depopulate draws a card for if you have multiple colored creatures, right? So this one gives you a clue token if you have more creatures. So yeah, not exciting to see another board wipe. Eh? All right, we got Novice Inspector, which is a human detective for one planes. You get a 1/2, and when it enters the battlefield, investigate. Create a clue token. Okay, so this is good. It's 2 cards. You know, it's 2 rectangles in one. Allows you to give. You get draw a card later down the road. I'm trying to remember the name of it. We've seen this card before, right? Raven Inspector, and I believe that was exactly that, right? So Thraben Inspector was a 1/2 for 1 white when it enters the battlefield investigate, and it was top quality. So I'm going to give this one a B. If it's anything like the Thraben Inspector of the past, it's going to be a top performing common. And we've seen Detective and Power less than 2 synergies already. So I think the Novice Inspector is going to be one that I'm looking for. All right. On the job, got creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn and an investigate. Okay, so the board pump strategy. There's definitely going to be a go wide strategy in white, usually is, and like trumpet blast kind of effects where you're bumping up your board tend to be better when they cost a little bit less than 4 and double pip white. So I'm gonna go with a D on this one. It's situational. If you have the go wide deck, then maybe you bump this up a little bit, but it's not one that I think I'm gonna be looking to put in every single one of my decks. The investigation is kind of interesting. I like that since that's kind of a theme in the set. Um, but again, this is one of those cards that, like, if you imagine the worst possible circumstance, also known as the floor, if you have no creatures, this does nothing, right? It creates a clue token for 2 double pip white. So, can it help you win the game? Yeah. Is it something that is going to reliably win you the game every single time? I don't know. So, I'm going to give this one a D. And here's one that is a spoiler. So we've got the Rope Respecter, is what we'll call it for now. And this is a 1/1 flying lifelink human detective for 1 and a white. And whenever another detective enters the battlefield under your control, or a detective you control is turned face up, Rope Respecter gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And I like this. I think that, assuming that you're able to kind of reliably make this into a 2/2 flying lifelink for 2, we saw how good Rune Lurker Bat was in the race. Lifelink is not fair when you're beating your opponent up with flyers. So I'm going to give this one a B. And then Sanctuary Wall, we've got a 0/4 for 1 and a white with, so we've got a Defender 0/4, 2 and a white, tap target creature. You may put a stun counter on it. If you do, put a stun counter on Sanctuary Wall. Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, so cheap effects like 1 white and tap target creature are like cube levels of power. So 2 and a white is a little bit expensive, and then the fact that it takes the creature out for a turn is interesting, but it also takes itself out for a turn. So as long as you have kind of a middle to late game strategy where you have plenty of mana, this can be another piece of removal that helps prevent yourself from getting run over. I'm going to give it a D because I don't think if you're going to be like in a beatdown strategy, then this is a little bit not really what you want to be doing. But yeah, if we're doing like the attrition control thing, then this is probably worth picking up. Seasoned Consultant, we got a 1/3 human detective for 1 and a white. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, Seasoned Consultant gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Okay, so the 3 or more creatures and the 2 or less, like, these all are things that the detective deck seems to be doing as well. So I'm curious to see if there's a lot of crossover between archetypes. And so, assuming you have a whole bunch of human detectives that you've played for super cheap, this is a 3/3 for 2. Yeah, I'll give this one a C. I think that, if you're playing it out as a 1/3, it blocks the other grizzly bears, and then it kind of like once you get to the go wide, it becomes a 3/3, which is overstated for what you played, and it has synergies. So I think this is going to be a fine 2-drop to pick up. If you don't have the go wide strategy though, then you just like a 1/3 for 2 tends to be kind of filler to bad filler. Here we've got a rare that we're going to call the 10th District Hero, and it is a detective. I think it's a human detective. I forgot to write it down. Oh no, it becomes a human detective. Okay, so it's a 2/3 for 1 and a white. I apologize, I didn't write down the creature type for that one. For 1 and a white, you've got a mana sink, collect evidence 2, and so collecting evidence is where you remove stuff from your graveyard. So you have to have self-mill to turn this on, but it becomes a human detective with base power and toughness 4/4 and gains vigilance. And then 2 and a white, if it is a detective, it becomes a legendary creature named Leva the Stalwart. It has base and power toughness 5/5, and it gains other creatures you control have indestructible. Wow. Okay, well, as long as you can like fill your graveyard with stuff, then this becomes an interesting one. So let's just assume it's a 2/3 human, and then it becomes a human detective, and then it becomes Maliva the Stalwart. Um, so 2/3 for 2 is great. Making it into a 4/4 for 1 and a white. If you have the self mill, that's great. You get a 4/4 vigilance, and it's permanent. It's not until end of turn. And then the next one, 2 and a white, collect evidence 4 becomes a 5/5 vigilance, and other creatures you control have indestructible. Yeah, I mean, that seems like a bomb. All right, I'm going to give that one an A. That seems like a great one. Curious to see what its actual name is. And we've got Unyielding Gatekeeper, which is a 3/2 for 1 and a white. You get an Elephant Cleric. Disguise for 1 and a white. When Unyielding Gatekeeper is turned face up, exile another target non-land permanent. If you controlled it, return it to the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, its controller creates a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. Cool, so it's a blink effect or a removal effect. For cheap, too. So we remove their best thing and make a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. I like this more for the blink effect on my own stuff. So if I blink my own dude, you get to exile it and then return it and get another ETB. And then it's a 3, like, you turn your 2/2 ward 2 into a 3/2 for 2. Yeah. Okay, that's great. I'm going to give this one a B as well. Is it enough? Is it strong enough for me to just really like drop everything and go into white? I don't think so. Hey, Avino Meister, what's up? Yes. So the Unyielding Gatekeeper, like the disguise mechanic allows you to play as Morph, but it's Morph with Ward 2. 10th District Hero is the name of this one. In Perimeter Enforcer? Ah, Perimeter Enforcer. You don't like Rope Respecter? I like Rope Respecter. Hey, what's up, Dewdrop? How you doing? Yeah, so I'm gonna give this one a B. I think this is a pretty solid one. More so for the blink, but being able to turn something into a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token can work if you're in a pinch. But generally, giving them a token, like things that even if your opponent gets a 1/1, makes it quite a bit worse removal. All right, we've got Wojak Investigator, which is a 2/4 angel detective for 2 and a white. You get a flying vigilance. At the beginning of your upkeep, investigate once for each opponent who has more cards in hand than you. Okay, so 2/4 flying vigilance for 3 is a fine stat block. And then if you're down a card, it gives you stuff to rebuild, and it has the power 2 or less. So you could up this with it has some synergies there, and it's a detective. So these are all good things. I'm gonna give this one a B. Boundary Abider, yeah, I like that too, Avino Meister. And then we've got Wrench, which is so this is gonna have there's a whole set of equipment that are based off of the murder weapons in Clue. So the fact that all the equipments are clues and also the murder weapons from Clue is fun. I like that a lot. So we've got Wrench, which is our equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance. And the equipment cost is 2. And then you can have tap 3 and tap it to tap target creature. The equipped creature gains that. Whew. And then it can also tap 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. So no revolver. Okay, well maybe they had a problem printing guns. So the revolver's missing. Well, revolver's in the billiard room. So I like the +1/+1 in vigilance, and then like tap 3 and tap it, tap target creature is kind of interesting and controlling. The fact that these all have clues for drawing a card, if these were equip costing 1, it would be broken. So until I'm convinced about other cards that have the equipment cost synergies, I think the equip cost 2 is going to be enough for me to say no. And I might be underestimating how good the clue is to be able to sacrifice it for an additional card, but I'm going to start these off with a D. I'm not super excited because of the high equipment cost. And then we've got Agency Outfitter, which is our first blue card. So I'm going to take a quick little break here, and I'll be right back after I fresh my voice. So 5 out of 6 works for Wooburg too. Yeah, that's true. You can't have one of each weapon, and you'd have to have one be colorless, I guess. You can tell the Sphinx is a detective because of the hat. Yeah. Oh man. All right, so I'll be right back and continue this mammer jammer of rambling about the new cards. Wait, which? Well, there was a duplicate of me. All right. All right, let's begin blue then. And we're right on schedule. It took about an hour to do that. So keep on keeping on. So Agency Outfitter, which I think we're going to have to call Urban Outfitter just because of the hat. Styling. Anyway, you get a Sphinx Detective for 4 double pip blue. Get a 4/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your graveyard, hand, and/or library for a card named Magnifying Glass and/or a card named Thinking Cap, and put them onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle. Okay, so not knowing what Magnifying Glass and Thinking Cap are, which are probably colorless artifacts, um, you get to put them onto the battlefield. So this is 3 cards in 1. That's kind of cool. This one's gonna be a little bit hard to determine its value without knowing what the other cards are. But assuming the Magnifying Glass and the Thinking Cap are at least okay, um, I think I'd be okay. Like if this was, I want this to be a 4/4 flyer, right? Like 4/3 is definitely understated, so I'm gonna give this one a B. I might go down on it if the Magnifying Glass and Thinking Cap are just awful. Behind the Mask, we've got an instant for 1 blue. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may collect Evidence 6, which is exile cards with total mana value 6 or greater from your graveyard. Okay, so it's based on mana value. Cool. And then until end of turn, target artifact or creature becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/3. If evidence was collected, it has base power and toughness 1/1 until end of turn instead. Cool. So you can use it as removal on something really big if you have the evidence. Kind of use it as like an eaten by piranhas effect, or you can just turn something into a 4/3. Okay, so this ranges from a pretty bad effect because it doesn't draw you a card. Yeah, so this is kind of like a relic roar, exactly, which wasn't very impressive in the last set. And but diminish is all. I mean, you've got 2 cards in 1. Might make it playable. I'm gonna go with no. I would rather have my like instant speed immediately remove something instead of just making it into a 1. But that is a very expensive kicker. Yeah, the collect evidence 6 is nothing to scoff at. And I think that the decks that do care about collecting evidence are going to want to save it for other things than a removal that can backfire, right? So I'm gonna give this one a D. Good point, Mercurio. You can also make one of your opponent's artifacts into a 1/1 and then kill it. So you can, it's a little bit of like a 2 combo piece, but could do it. Benthic Criminologists is a 4 and a blue for a Merfolk Wizard. You get a 4/5. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, draw a card. Aha! Okay, I like this because hopefully you have a lot of clue tokens, and then you don't have to pay the 2 to pop the clue token. So when it enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card off of your clue token, and then as long as you're feeding this enough artifacts, synergies, it continues to draw cards. It's not amazing, but like doable. And a 4/5 for 5 is an okay stat block. It's not amazing, but like it's an acceptable one. I'm gonna give this one a C. I think that this one is like it's a big, it's a big enough booty to kind of block up the ground and then gives you card draw, which blue tends to be liking. But it's not really something I'm looking as a top common or anything. Bubble Smuggler, 1 and a blue for an octopus fish. You get a 2/1 with disguise. Super expensive though, 5 and a blue for the disguise cost. As Bubble Smuggler is turned face up, put 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Okay. So you play it out as a 2/2 ward 2 creature for 3, and then for 6 you flip it into a 5/4 at instant speed. Hey, what's up, Corpax? Yeah, Bubble Smuggler, smuggling bubbles, man. It's a vibe for sure. All right, so that's not astounding, but a 2/1 for 2 is acceptable. If you can flip it for free, then that's cool. Hey, what's up, bad player? I've got to get through these set reviews today, so can you play our match after? In about 2 hours? Yeah, because I didn't think about that with ACDC this week, as far as our community match goes. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with in a vacuum where there's no other ways to like cheaply flip this. That it's just too expensive. Paying a total of 9 mana for a 6/4 or sorry, a 5/4 doesn't feel very good. So I'm gonna give this one a D. You do accept victories by default. Well, let's try to play after my set review. Burden of Proof. We've got 1 in a blue for an enchantment. Enchant creature with flash. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 as long as it's a detective that you control. Otherwise, it has base power and toughness 1/1 and can't block detectives. Huh. Okay, so we're seeing some more like removal that's not really removal in blue. And the fact that this has flash is a lot more appealing than when it doesn't have flash. Giving something +2/+2 for 2 is okay as a combat trick, kind of like Scythe, right? And then the fact that it can be removal and remove a blocker if you have the like detectives deck. I'm gonna give this one a D. I think that like maybe it goes up to a C in the detectives deck, but I don't think I'm really excited to play this just in a vacuum. The like eaten by piranhas with flash was okay. It wasn't amazing, but kind of like a C minus. So maybe D is a little bit low, but I'm gonna give it a D. Oh, Woodfeld, you're 4+1/+1 counter, so 6/5. Yeah, I said 5/4. Still too expensive for my interests. We got another one of the clue equipment here. We got a candlestick, and we've got equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature attacks, surveil 2. Now that's interesting because I'm looking for ways to fill my graveyard, and surveil 2 is a good way to fill the graveyard. It's a little bit of expensive, but then you get to draw later as well. I think this one's better than the wrench, but I think there's probably going to be better ways than a 3-cost way to get surveil 2 on a a repetitive basis. So I'm gonna give this one a D. I could be too low on the clue weapons. Yeah, Corpax is pointing out that the burden of proof has flexibility because it's a scythe or an eaten by piranhas in one card. So it's not both though, right? You got to choose one or the other, which might make it better, right? Might bring it up a little bit. Maybe a D is too low, but these are first impressions after all. They are prone to changing. And then we have Case of the Filched Falcon, which is an enchantment for 1 blue. When it enters the battlefield, investigate. You're going to create a clue token, which is cool. And then to solve, you control 3 or more artifacts, which I'm sure there's a deck that's going to do that. And then solved, you have to pay 2 and a blue and sacrifice it. But you get to put 4+1/+1 counters on target non-creature artifact, and it becomes a 0/0 bird creature with flying in addition to its other types. Okay, so for 1, you get a clue, then it flips, you tap 3, sacrifice it to get a 4/4 flying bird. And that bird can immediately attack if it's an artifact that's already been in play. All right, I like this. I like this one. I'm gonna give this one a B. I think it's doing enough. It's doing enough to be interesting. Yeah. So the blue white case detectives there's some cool cards going on here with the case deck, and there's some good cases. This one seems like a good one. Case of the ransacked lab. We've got an enchantment for 2 and a blue. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. All right, so maybe we get a spell slinger. We didn't have a spell slinging archetype in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and I missed it because I love my Dimir and my Izzet spells. So we'll see if maybe there's something there. To solve, you've cast 4 or more instant and sorcery spells this turn. Good luck with that in limited. And then solved, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Well, holy cow, if you can solve it, it's amazing, but you're gonna need a whole bunch of cycling spells to be able to flip this. I'm gonna give this one a D. I'm sure somebody's gonna do something pretty cool, but having to cast 4 or more instant and sorcery spells in a turn this isn't gonna be solved. And then the effect of instant and sorcery spells costing 1 less isn't worth 3 to me. But it's only really viable if it's solved, but I think this has constructed applications potentially. But I'm not really looking forward to this in limited. Hey, Shock, what's up? You've been here lurking as you were walking near Wild Beast, aka the dog. Very good, very good. Underwunk, I don't think so. I don't think we've gotten to a repeatable 3/2 unblockable. So excited to get there. All right, we've got the Cold Case Cracker, which is a detective, spirit detective. Got a 3/3 flyer for 3 and a blue, so a flying hill giant, which I'm sure has a name that I'm blanking on. And when Cold Case Cracker dies, investigate. All right, I think that's filler. I think I'm fine with that. I'm not sure it's a bomb, Thunderwunk, but Phantom Monster. Is that right? Phantom Monster is the 3/3, the flying hill giant. That's right. That rings a bell. Yeah. So you get a Phantom Monster that when it dies, it investigates. Now, Phantom Monster isn't something that's usually broken, right? But it tends to be kind of like hill giants if they're doing, you know, tend to be like bad filler. The flying makes it a little bit more. This is probably like C, but maybe it's a C minus. And but I think I'll find myself like putting these in decks just as filler in the 4-drop slot. So I'll give this one a C. It's nice that it gives you an investigate when it dies. All right, did I skip one? No. Okay. Conspiracy Unraveler. Get a 6/6 flyer for 5 double pip blue. It is a Sphinx detective. And you may collect evidence 10 rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. So you have to exile cards from your graveyard with total mana value 10 to be able to play things. That's not something that Limited is really looking to do on a reliable basis. But you get a 6/6 flyer for 7. 7 tends to be a little bit expensive. Kind of depends on the pace of the set. It's a little bit slower, like Cons of Tarkir, because of all of the disguise morph cards. Then I could see that being a little bit better. And yeah, I mean, if we assume that it's like a typical, modern day limited set pace, then 7 drops tend to be pretty bad. So I think this one I'm going to give a C. And that basically means I'm never going to play it because it's a mythic. And usually you want to start off with your pack one, your pick ones being better cards than that. We got Coveted Falcon, which is a bird, artifact creature bird, 1/4 flyer for 1 double pip blue. When it attacks, gain control of target permanent you own but don't control. That's interesting. And you get a disguise, 1 and a blue, which I like. Yeah, it's nice and cheap. You get a 1/4 that could definitely surprise somebody. Doesn't really trade though. When Coveted Falcon is turned face up, target opponent gains control of any number of target permanents you control. Draw a card for each one they gain control of this way. Wait, okay, so the birds are bringing you crap and then they're taking them back. So you've turned it face up, you give them crap, draw cards for everything that you gave them, all the little trinkets and whatnot. And then if it lives and attacks, you get to gain control of one of those permanents you gave them back. You give them stuff and then you steal it back. I'm not sure I'd give them a land, because you're not getting that land back until it attacks, right? I guess you could just get it. I guess you get it back immediately. I don't know. This one's cool. It has the ability to draw multiple cards, which is amazing and limited. Yeah. So you give them a tapped land, right? And you draw a card for that. Then you attack because you flipped it up and you can immediately attack with it. And then you gain control of the permanent that you just gave them. Now, if they do instant speed removal in response after you give them the permanent, you're not getting your permanent back, right? Because you have to do this, you have to flip it before it attacks. You flip it face up before you attack, or you declare attackers. Otherwise, you're going to give them permanents and not get them back. So, I mean, that's still decent, right? You play out a 2/2 ward 2 on 3, and then disguise, flip it up, draw a card, attack in with a flyer. Seems pretty good. And then, like, heaven forbid you ever get multiples or like copy it or whatever, right? Like, you could get a fleet of birds doing some interesting stuff. I mean, the restrictive mana cost of double pip blue is definitely not going to make it something that I'm looking for in every deck. There's also synergies with the power 1, so power 2 or less is good. Yeah, and then you can also draw more, right? Like if you're in that situation where you need to draw to an answer, you're going to lose, right? Like you can give them a lot of stuff instead of just a tapped land. I'm still not sure I'm even going to give them a land. I think I'm going to give them like, I guess a clue token they could pop in response. Yeah. You know what? I think it's interesting enough. I'm going to give it a B. I don't think this is something that like I'm going to open up and be like, pack 2, pick 1. We have to switch to being blue. But I do think that like if I'm in blue, I'm going to be happy, and I think this is a reason to be like pack 1, pick 1, going down the blue path. Kind of hard to say without how like actually playing this one, right? And like instant speed removal would have to kill the 4 toughness as well. So, all right, Crime Stopper Sprite. We get a 2/2 Fairy Detective for 2 and a blue, so we get our Windrake of the set. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may collect evidence 6, and then it enters the battlefield, tap target creature. If evidence was collected, put a stun counter on it. Well, it doesn't have flash, so the tap is a little bit. It's interesting. 2/2 flyer for 3 that taps somebody, and then if you do put the stun counter, I like that. I mean, it's pretty tempo. It's pretty tempo based. And I think the Fairy Detective deck is going to be kind of tempo because it's power 2 or less and a lot of little stuff. So I'm going to go with. Oh, we have a question here about the previous card, real quick. Would this allow you to gain something trapped by Duskrow's Reliquary? No, I don't think so because it's exiled. Yeah, it's in exile, so it doesn't count as a permanent you can take back. Back to the Windrake. I'm going to give this one a C. I think that it's not amazing, but like a Windrake that taps something is enough. And then if you are doing the evidence collection, maybe you can get this into the removal, kind of like the Whaling Pirates. And so I think that, Whaling Pirates, I don't think we're that amazing, but like we're okay, we're playable. I think the Crime Stopper Sprite's going to be in the same boat. We got the Cryptic Coat. Cryptic Coat enters battlefield, the top card of your library. When Cryptic Coat enters the battlefield, cloak the top of your library, then attach Cryptic Coat to it. So this cloak effect is you create a disguised card, even if that card doesn't have disguise. And so you put it onto the battlefield as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2, and then you can turn it face up for its mana cost if it is a creature card. So if you hit like a spell or a land, you can never turn it face up. But you get equipped creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. And it doesn't have an equip cost. You have to replay it. So you pay 1 and a blue to return Cryptic Coat to its owner's hand. But notably, the cloaked creature has Ward 2. So for 3, you're getting a 3/2 unblockable creature with Ward 2 for 3 that just keeps coming back. Yeah, okay, so this is the one that Thunderwunk was talking about. This is the one that is the repeatable 3/2 unblockable. Um, yeah, no, this is great. So even if they like kill the cloaked creature or whatever in response, they have to pay the ward, and then if they ever do, like you can always just return it to your hand if it's just sitting there because it doesn't go to the graveyard when the creature dies. So then it allows you to bring it back. 3/2 unblockable recurring threat. Yeah, I'll give this one an A. I think this one is going to be one of those that is exciting enough to switch colors if you're in pack 2, pick 1. We also see a fair amount of equipment in the set, so there might be additional synergies as well. Yeah. So I'm going to be going with the I'm gonna give this one an A. I think this one's it's looking pretty great. What's up, Vorpal? How you doing? Yeah. Well, it also creates additional creatures regardless, right? Like if you hit a spell or land or whatever, and then like you can also turn that creature face up, and the equipped creature is still equipped. So you can turn your 2/2 into something bigger than a 2/2 that can't be blocked. So that's pretty amazing if you do hit a creature, and if you don't, a 3/2 unblockable is still fine. The ward puts it over the top too, because like if they go to remove your 3/2 unblockable, they have to pay the ward too. So that seems really great. Imagine in standard casting Cryptic Coat on a hexproof creature. Yeah, yeah. I think there's actually some hexproof creatures in this set as well. We'll see. So Curious Inquiry is a enchant creature for 1 blue. It gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, investigate. So kind of like a curiosity, but slower because you get clues instead of just straight up draw cards. I'm not big on these. I'm gonna give this one a D. I don't like cards that 2 for 1. If the set is really low on instant speed removal, then they tend to be okay. Um, but yeah, this feels like just a worse curiosity or curious obsession. But yeah, same thing or same idea. Yeah. So D. Deduce is a 1 in a blue instant draw card. Investigate. Okay, so this is the sort of thing that like is going to tempt some people because like cycling and you get an investigation. Um, Generally, this sort of thing I would rather see it cost 1. So if there's multiple effects in the set that allow you to create instances and sorceries cost 1 less to cast, that's more interesting, and it does help fuel your graveyard. Um, but I tend to want my cycling cheap spells to cost 1 instead of 2. And it is draw 2 cards over 2 turns for 4, which is a slightly overpriced divination. So I'm going to go with a D on this one at the beginning here. I think there is probably a deck that's going to want it, but it's the spell heavy deck and maybe not a whole bunch of them. Yeah, it's not going in every single blue deck though. Dramatic Accusation is an enchant creature for 2 in a blue. When it enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. And then we've got tap blue, 2 blue, shuffle enchanted creature into its owner's library. Huh. All right. Well, this is removal that at common, generally you can do better than this sort of thing because like if they have, it doesn't remove the creature, it removes it as a blocker, but if it has a passive ability, it's just still going to be kicking your butt with that passive ability. So this sort of stuff, a D. It's kind of cool that you can shuffle the enchanted creature into its owner's library, but I don't really like it. Eliminate the impossible. We've got an instant speed, 1 in a blue, investigate. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end of turn. If any of them are suspected, they are no longer suspected at instant speed. Ooh, okay. At least a sideboard card, right? Because suspected creatures have menace and can't block. So if they're attacking you and they think they're going to be able to get through because they have menace, you can play this and they no longer have menace. And not only that, but they become worse attackers. So this one's going to be kind of a pain in the butt to play around because it's also giving you that -2/-0 effect, which we saw with Cogwork Wrestler works reasonably well. And then you get an investigate so that you get a draw later. Huh. Eliminate the impossible. Well, in a defensive deck, I really like this. It's okay in an offensive deck with flyers too, right? Where you're like your opponent thinks there's gonna be. I'm gonna give this one a B. I think that especially if a lot of the set is these disguised cards, like this makes it so that all of your 2/2 ward 2s trade with their 2/2 ward 2s, and you don't have to pay the ward. Yeah, I think this one's going to be a pain in the butt to play around, and a uncommon. So yeah, I like this. The art is really good too. I like that, and the flavor is pretty good too. Half the city had motive. Time to narrow down who had also had the means and opportunity. Gotta get your detective in. Yeah. I'm gonna give that one a B. All right, exit specialist. We've got a 2/1 human detective for 1 in a blue, and exit specialist can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. Okay, so we got like a skulk, and we've got a disguise. When exit specialist is turned face up, return another target creature to its owner's hand. Bounce, but with the ward, you're still gonna have to pay that, right? You'd have to pay 4 to bounce something of theirs that's disguised. But it's something that's not disguised. I like cards that bounce other cards. Yeah, there's a little bit of a new Capenna feel shock. I agree. Um, I like this. So you can turn it face up and bounce something that's a problem, and then it can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. Might not pair up very well if there's a whole bunch of disguised creatures. And it's worth pointing out here that Isaiah is saying that you get to see the morph that you bounce. Ah, so you get some information on your opponent as well. Okay, so for 4, you would have to pay the ward 2. But on 3, you play this out, and then on 4, you bounce something of theirs. Feels okay. A little tempo, like very tempo negative, due on turn 4. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to say how much of the set is going to be power 3 or greater without looking at the other part of the set. So first impressions are that I like what this card is doing. I think that it's a detective, it's power 2 or less, it has disguise. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. If the whole set is just a bunch of disguise creatures that are 2/2 ward 2s, then flipping this up is a little bit worse. So I'm gonna give this one a B for now, but that's assuming that like green and red are doing stuff that's a lot bigger than 2/2 creatures, and like blue white is the thing that's doing the 2/2 creatures. I might come down on that one in the future, but I'll give it a B as a starting place. All right, Fey Flight. 1 and a blue for an enchantment with flash. Enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, enchanted creature gains hexproof until end of turn. And enchanted creature gets +2 or +0 +1 +0 and has flying. Oh boy. Yeah, I like this one. So you do it in response to removal, and then your thing is bigger than it was before and better at attacking, or more powerful, and it has flying. And then if it is going to get in for lethal and your opponent doesn't have the removal, it has hexproof, and so there's nothing they can do about it. Yeah, spicy trick is spicy for sure. I'm giving this one a B. All right, Forensic Gadgeteer, 2/3 for 2 and a blue for a Valdalkin Artificer Detective. You see some Vidalkins, which are the blue people from Esper in Shards of Alara, I think, if you go back that far. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, Investigate. Okay. Activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in the cost to less than 1. So all of your clues become 1s. So there's an artifact theme that's going to lean heavily on clues. And this is going to be one of those cards that you pick and you're like, all right, let's see if that archetype's open. Am I going to ditch stuff to pick this up? No. I'm going to give this one a B. I think this is one of those that you pick up and you're like, let's try to do the thing with the clue tokens. It's a detective. At least goes into blue-white. And making all of your clue tokens cost 1 less to activate that's real. So I like that. All right, Forensic Researcher is a Merfolk Detective 1/3 for 2 and a blue, and it has tap, untap another target permanent you control, or tap, collect evidence 3, tap target creature you don't control. 1/3 tapper, huh? So far, we haven't seen any easy ways to fill the graveyard. Is the one problem, right? This one at least ramps you. You can untap your land and be able to tap the land again, but a 3-cost mana ramper is not a 2-cost mana ramper. And then Collective Evidence 3, tap target creature you don't control seems expensive. I'm gonna give this one a D. I think there's better. I want this to cost 2. I want this to be I want this to be a 2-drop instead of a 3-drop. But I do think it has some applications, right? You have a permanent that has something that's busted when it taps, like that's always a possibility. So I think it can go somewhere. I don't think it's unplayable, but I'll give that one a D. Furtive Courier, we've got can't be blocked as long as you've sacrificed an artifact this turn, which goes with the clues. Whenever Furtive Courier attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. Ooh, I like ye. I like ye. Oh, so 3/2 stat block sucks. I hate a 3/2 for 3, but I love loot. And you can make it unblockable as long as you're sacrificing a blue. 2 of these with the Deep Root Pilgrimage is infinite 1/1s in standard. Yeah, that's interesting. I can't go as far as to say that it's a great card because it's a 3/2 for 3, which like that stat block alone kind of really hurts you. So I'm gonna give this one a C. I guess the unblockable might make it better than that, but I'm always wary of a 3/2 for 2, just because like if there's a shock in the set, then you lose 2 mana to X2 hate. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's like it's like Merfolk Cave Diver kind of thing, like unblockable recurring threat gets in. The thing is that like it was it was a lot harder. Merfolk Cave Diver didn't die to a braid, right? So like if there's common removal in red or in black that deals 2 damage, the 3/2 stat block just tends to be really poor, right? So like, are there games where this is going to get in for unblockable damage and win you the game? Like, yeah. And does it help like smooth you into those draws? Yes. But it can die to like 1 cost or 2 cost removal, and then you lose in the value gain. So I'm going to give it a C. We'll start it there. I think it's a playable for a 3/2, which is a lot, because usually a 3/2 for 3 is just like a D or worse. Next up, we've got Hotshot Investigators. We got a 4/4 for 5 and a blue. When Hotshot Investigators enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature to its owner's hand. If you controlled it, investigate. Oh, I like this sort of card. So, it's understated for sure. You get a 4/4 for 6. But if you bounce their 5-drop, right? Like, I probably like this sort of card too much. It's kind of like playing a 4/4 for 4 that comes with a Brackish Blunder, right? And then you can bounce your own thing. And if you bounce if you bounce like a morph creature that has the ward 2, that sucks. But once again, I'm gonna have to kind of see how much of the set is disguised creatures. You can bounce your own thing, which there are some like there's some interesting ETBs in this set. I don't know. I'll give it a C. I'm probably too high on this, but like that's kind of what I want to be doing in some decks is playing like keep bouncing their stuff. So we haven't seen like a Brackish Blunder effect yet, I don't think. But if you can do that over and over, it overwhelms your opponent, right? So especially like in a tempo deck, I feel like this is an okay top end for a tempo deck. As long as you're doing 17 lands, which I think you will be doing because of all the clue tokens and all of the disguise. No, Nico Spade, I don't do plus and minus. I just do straight. I do S is an absolute busted holy cow bomb. A is I will pivot into this color if I open it up and pack 2 pick 1. B is I want it in my deck. C is I'm accepting of having it in my deck is like an 18 through 23rd card. And then D is situational to bad filler. And then F is garbage. Get it out of here. So, Intrude on the Mind. 3 double pip blue. For an instant, reveal the top 5 cards of your library and separate them into 2 piles. An opponent chooses one of those piles. Put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Create a 0/0 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each card put into your graveyard this way. Wow. So I'm getting this right. This either draws 3 cards and makes a 2/2 flyer, that sort of thing, or like it draws 2 cards and makes a 3/3, draws 3 cards, makes a 2/2, draws 5 cards. No, because the other pile goes into the graveyard. It's not draw. So this is a Surveil 5 for 5. Why is this so good? Am I missing why this is good? Oh, it is a draw. Okay, that's where I knew I must have missed it. You either put it into your hand or put it into your graveyard, and everything that you put into the graveyard is a +1/+1 counter on your creature, and you want to put stuff in your graveyard in this set anyway. So yeah, it's a draw 5 or a draw 4 and create a 1/1 flyer. Draw 3, create a 2/2 flyer, and then whatever the power of the flyer is how many cards you're putting into the graveyard. Factor Drifter instead of Factor Fiction and instead of Mole Drifter. I like that a lot. Factor Drifter, huh? For a mythic, a C means that you would never play it, right? B means that you actively want it. A means I'd drop everything to go pick it up. I don't think it's an A. So let's see if you create a 2/2 flyer and draw 3 though. Okay, so it would be a divination and a 2/2 flyer, or no, it would be a divination and a 3/3 flyer. I like the surveil aspect of this card. I'm gonna give it a B. I think there is a deck that wants to do this thing, and I think if I open it up, pack 1, pick 1, I'll try to do that thing. Because like I was saying, one of the things I'm looking for is ways to surveil, ways to descend or whatever, right? Like to fill my graveyard so that I have evidence to collect and use. So if they go with giving me a 5/5 flyer and surveil 5 is amazing, and then draw 5 for 5 is amazing. So the question is whether or not there exists a space in between 2 and 3 that's not amazing. And like a 2/2 flyer, draw 3, a 3/3 flyer, draw 2, still seems decent enough, right? So I'm going to give it a B. Might be too high on it. Jaded Analyst, we've got a 3/2 for 1 and a blue. Defender, whenever you draw your second card each turn, Jaded Analyst loses Defender and gains Vigilance until end of turn. Huh. Interesting. Okay. So it trades with a 2/2 Ward 2 for 3. Trades up from there too. And then whenever you draw your second card each turn, which we haven't seen, I mean, like the clue tokens allow you to draw a second card each turn, which would then allow it to be a 3/2 Vigilance. But the 3/2 I mean, if you're doing the like, yeah, I'll give it a C. It's not amazing, but like I like 2 drops, and this one is okay. The Defender, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the 3/3 in Lost Caverns, right? The Shipwreck Sentry, which if you could attack with it, sometimes it was okay. Otherwise, it was kind of like a C minus. Yeah, so I think C is okay. Living Conundrum. You get a 2/5 hexproof or elemental 4 and a blue. If you draw a card while your library has no cards in it, skip that draw instead. Hexproof on a card makes me nervous, man. Remember we were talking about like things to equip? Imagine if you equip this into a 3/5 unblockable hexproof. If you draw a card while your library has no cards in it, skip that draw instead. So you can't mill out. As long as there are no cards in your library, Living Conundrum has base power and toughness 10/10 and has flying and vigilance. Oh my god. Oh my god, okay. How easily can we just like chew through everything? What's up, Corky? Oh, not a homunculus, but homungulus. The 2/5 hexproof for 5. Yeah, I mean, like, that's not a super exciting stat, right? This really needs something to turn it into something exciting. Like synergizing it, right? Like the hat or whatever it was called. What was it? The cryptic coat. If you happen to randomly flip that onto your Living Conundrum, you get a 3/5 unblockable hexproof creature. That's kind of cool. So far, we've seen one Wrath Corky. We've only made it through white. It does just absolutely destroy all of the 2/2 Ward 2 creatures. That's true. And it allows, I mean, we haven't really seen much mill, though. So I'm going to say in a vacuum, there is no mill until proven otherwise. How excited am I to play a 2/5 hexproof for 5? Not very. But like it has some applications. More so than just like strictly situational, right? I'm going to give it a C. And if you have a way to like reliably mill into a 10/10, it's kind of tempting because of the hexproof. And it's definitely a turtle up card. Yeah, it's a very defensive card. It might be too high to give it a C. I'm thinking maybe it's a D off of the start, but I do have a tendency to favor aggro over attrition. Sir Mix-a-Lot would approve. It's also, yeah, notably it does fit with the two or less power defender or 2 or less power strategy, which it's been alluded to but not really figured out yet. Lost in the Maze is an enchantment for X and double pip blue with flash. When Lost in the Maze enters the battlefield, tap X target creatures and put a stun counter on those creatures that you don't control. So you can tap your own, and then tapped creatures you control have hexproof. Oh, that's interesting. So it's kind of like the March of Swirling Mist, where you can just use this to remove a lot of your tapped creatures, but you can also use it defensively and just give your creatures hexproof. Because like if all of your stuff is tapped, you just do double pip blue X equals 0 to give your tapped creatures hexproof. It's not bad. Yeah. I like it. I'm gonna give this one. I might give this one. If it didn't have a double pip blue, I'd give it an A. The double pip blue is a little bit restrictive. I'm gonna give it a B. I think that because like you can use it offensively and defensively, that's a lot of really cool flexibility. And it's hard to say how, like, if you're up against a whole bunch of ward 2 creatures, then this obviously is a worse effect. Um, but assuming that the whole set isn't just ward 2 creatures might be a bit of an assumption. I like it just even for protecting your own tapped disguised guys. So I think it's got some applications here. Yeah, and they did a really good job to like design the card to not make it super confusing. 20 years ago, this card would have been maybe not worded quite as cleanly. Mistway Spy, we've got a 1/1 Merfolk Detective for 1 blue with flying. Hell yeah. And it's got Disguise. And when Mistway Spy is turned face up, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, investigate. So this happens multiple times. This isn't just like a if at least one creature controls deals damage, draw, investigate. Like you get an investigation per card that damages your opponent. You can flip up at instant speed after your opponent has declared blockers and this is unblocked. Yeah, I like this a lot. I'm going to give this one a B. I think it's a detective, it's power 2 or less, it has disguise. It's a 1/1 flyer if you don't want to play it out on 3. There's a lot of cool stuff going on with that. All right, we've got Out Cold, which is a 3 and a blue for an instant. This spell can't be countered. This includes the ward ability. Good to clarify there. Tap up to 2 target creatures and put a stun counter on each of them. Investigate. Yeah, Flying Man is the floor, exactly. Like, worst this is a Flying Man. Flying Man tends to be okay. We've seen this time and time again, right? The 3 and a blue to tap 2 and put a stun counter on them, and it tends to be not great because it doesn't remove it. It's like a tempo thing, right? Like if you're removing something and the game's over, it's fine. If it's removing them for a little bit but not permanently, then it's not as good. So I'm gonna give this one a D until it proves to me proves itself otherwise. The investigation might be enough to make it a little bit better than it has been in the past. And tempo is looking kind of strong. So I think that there's, D doesn't mean unplayable. D just means put it in your tempo deck, right? Props, edict, edict, I'm gonna say that eidetic memory. My vocabulary doesn't extend that far. I'm not exactly sure what that word means. Somebody in chat probably does. But when Prof's memory enters the battlefield, draw a card. And deck tech. No. So wait, so you can cycle it. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. You have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than one card this turn, which itself triggers, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn -1. Sweet. Ah. Eidetic. Eidetic memory is photographic memory. Cool. All right. So this comes in, draws you a card, and then every time you are drawing cards in the future, they're going to result in +1/+1 counters. It's not even +1/+1 till end of turn. It's straight up just like a permanent buff. I like this one a lot. I mean, the clue deck is going to be triggering draws, hopefully, right? I'm going to give this one a B. I think that, as long as you've got the like clue deck, which it's probably Simic or we'll see what has the most like clue synergies. Doubt it's blue red, but maybe it's blue red. It's definitely going to go in a deck. All right, Projector Inspector is a 3/2 for 3 human detective. When it or another detective enters the battlefield under your control, and whenever a detective you control is turned face up, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Okay. I'll give this one a C. The 3/2 stat block, again, I don't like it, but I do like looting. And this is a loot on ETB, and then a loot every time a detective enters the battlefield. Or no, whenever a detective is turned face up. Okay, so it's not every detective becomes a loot. And it's a draw 2 enabler, right? Is the loot enough to forgive it for being a 3/2 for 3? You know what? No, I'm gonna go with D. I'm gonna go with D. If you're in a detective deck and you have a way to recurribly retrigger this, then this is fine. And yeah, Azorius or blue white is the detective deck. So like if you're in Azorius, then I think this is better. But outside of the Azorius deck, I don't think I like this. Like if you're in white blue, fine, but I think in blue just by itself, or maybe if you're in the draw two, right? Like if you're in whatever turns out to be the draw two archetype, that that one seems bright. Yeah, the issue here is that oh no, it does. It turns every detective into a loot. Okay, I thought it was when a detective you control is turned face up. It's both. So all of your detectives become loots. Maybe okay. We know what C. I'm sticking with C. I gave it a C originally. I gave it a D. Then I'm gonna give it a C. Let's go with a C. Loot on every detective is interesting. Reasonable doubt. 1 in a blue. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, and then you suspect up to 1 target creature, which means you give it menace and it can't block permanently. I tend to like this sort of thing. I tend to like counter spells, even though this isn't quite like a mana link, right? But it is like a quench. Yeah, so it's a quench that gives you a suspect. I tend to like quench maybe more than I should. I tend to be okay about quenches. So I don't think it's something that I'm like super excited for though. I think I'll give it a C. In the past, I've given quenches a B, and maybe that's too high. Yeah, and without playing, I don't know how the suspect thing is going to be as a mechanic. And I don't actually know the suspect mechanic to its full entirety, right? Because I think there's other things that happen with like if a creature is suspected, do this, and so like just the menace and can't block part of it. Like if the more aggressive your deck is, the better, which is kind of weird because then like this is less of a control card as it is more a tempo card. So I like it. I like that because like I tend to be more of a tempo player than a strictly control player. So but this sort of thing is really great in that tempo deck. So I'm gonna go with I'm gonna give this one a C. Reenact the crime. And we've got a 1 triple pip blue for an instant. Exile target non-land card in a graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn. Okay, copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. All right, guys, I think we have our first F. It's too much, the card has to go into the graveyard this turn, and then it's a super restricted mana cost to copy it. Sure, you can cheese out something really cool, but like that's a constructed card, and even then, I think it's a constructed card that like is a lot of hoops. So yeah, I mean, you get to do it against your opponent, right? Yeah, so like an anti-reanimator card for standard, I can see that. In limited, this I'm just gonna it's an F. I'm not playing it. I'm not going down that path. Steam Core Scholar. We got a 2/2 flying vigilance, 2 in a blue for okay, so we've got a vigilant Windrake. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. Then discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant or sorcery card or a creature card with flying. Cool. Alright. It goes in the Spellslinger deck. The flying Spellslinger deck, right? Yeah, I'll give this one a B. Yeah, this guy's awesome. If depending on the pace of the Spellslinger deck, it's very good for tempo because it helps you like draw into your draw into your tempo and not stumble. And then you have plenty of instances and sorceries to discard if you're in that spell archetype. Yeah, and you get to, self mill is good, right? Discarding 2 cards is good if you want clue collection. So sealing with synergy is pretty awesome, yeah. I like it too. I'm gonna give this one a B. All right, here we go. We got one that I could, when I grabbed it, it didn't have the English name. And we got Contratiempo Inesperado. The owner of target spell or non-land permanent puts it on the top or bottom of their library. So Isaiah would rather play a Windrake than what? Oh, me too, Isaiah. So Isaiah is saying I would rather play Windrake than Oracle of the Alpha, which is the thing that puts a whole bunch of the power 9 into your deck. I don't like Oracle of the Alpha. I think that it's a bad card, but don't hate me. It's just that like 3 out of the 9 cards it puts into your deck are good, and then the other 6 are not great on turn 8 or whatever, right? Exactly. Windrake doesn't put garbage in my deck. This is why Isaiah and I are friends. All right, so this one is like, you know, we've seen this before. 4 cost, put something on the top or bottom of their library. The double pit blue makes it a little bit more restrictive than what we just saw with Unlucky Drop. But I tend to like these. The double pip in blue, though, is going to be rough. A little bit more than just the Unlucky Drop was. So I'm going to give this one a C. I think that removing your opponent's permanents and putting them on top of their library is like, it's great if you're trying to outvalue your opponents or playing tempo. Yeah, some people don't like them. Some people really don't like this effect. If they put the card on top of their library and then draw it again, like, it's preventing them from drawing into future threats, right? Like, I've liked this sort of effect that puts it not just into your opponent's hand, but puts it onto the bottom, or puts it onto the top of their library. And typically, like, I like this if it costs 4, but I don't like it that it's double pit blue. But it's still enough that like I like this effect. Yeah, and then like the other thing too is that there are a lot of creatures in the set that so far have had interesting ETBs, which makes this less interesting. So it's probably, C is probably too high. I will admit that I have a tendency to rate that kind of card highly. Surveillance Monitor. We've got a 3/3 Vidalcan Detective for 3 and a blue. So we got a Hill Giant. When it enters the battlefield, you may collect evidence 4. And whenever you collect evidence, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Which, anytime that you're collecting evidence, is going to create another 1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Thopters don't take breaks, and neither does he. Okay. Wait, this hits spells? Oh yeah, it hits spells. I didn't even notice that. That is nice. Usually that doesn't hit spells. Usually just non-land permanents. So maybe that justifies the double pit blue. Depends on how good blue is. Surveillance Monitor is a 3/3 Hill Giant that collect evidence 4, create a 1/1, and then if you do it in the future, you're going to get a 1/1 flyer each time. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a restrictive space. Hill Giants generally have to do something pretty interesting for them to be justifiable, right? Adaptive Gym Guard turned out to be not so great. Whaling Pirates turned out to be okay in the tempo deck. The 3/3 red one for Descended was garbage. So it's a 4/4 for 4 only if you collect evidence for 4. Yeah. I'm not sold on this, but maybe there's a collect evidence theme that has some self-mill enablers outside of loot. So we've seen some looters that are detectives. So yeah. Without knowing how many decks want to do the collect evidence thing, having only gone through white and blue, I'm going to put this one as a D, which is situational depending on how much. If you have a whole bunch of evidence collection as your thing, then this is going to be a playable card. But in a vacuum with no evidence collection and no loot, no enable, like, the floor on this is a Hill Giant, which is not great. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, surveil 1. Also, we had a new person here. Chippy Sticks, welcome to my community. Hope you're having a good day. There's no follow alerts or anything right now during these set reviews, but welcome to my community. And a 4-mana 3/3 that makes 2 1/1 flyers sounds sweet. It doesn't create 2 1/1 flyers. It creates 1, and that's if you collect evidence. And then you'd have to trigger something else that collects evidence again. I don't know. I feel like you have to collect evidence for this to be break even, and then additional stuff could push it over the top. But if you don't have anything in your graveyard, this is just a 3/3 for 4. So I'm going to go with, it has a space, but I think it's got kind of a niche space. Unauthorized Exit is, this is my first impression, right? And if it turns out that like every color is really good at looting and is going to be collecting evidence, and that's like a theme that's across all archetypes in the set, then clearly I'll have to come back and revisit this one. But unauthorized exit, we've got a 1 and a blue for an instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, surveil 1. Hey, brackish blunder, and it hits non-land permanents, so it's not even just creatures. I think tempo looks really good. I'm always a sucker for tempo, so I'm tempted to give this one a B. But I think that I've learned that that's probably a little bit too high. It does surveil, which is an enabler, and we can use this to collect evidence as an instant. Goes into the Spellslinger archetype. Which I think maybe the Spellslinger archetype is going to be the one that's the easiest to do the collect evidence for if you're like, cycling a bunch of spells into the graveyard. But anyway, I like this sort of effect. I'm going to give it a C. I used to give them Bs in the past, and I think that was probably a bit too high. So, and that brings us to black. So I'm going to take another quick little break here and rest my vocal cords, and we're right on pace. An hour for each color, and so hopefully we'll wrap things up here. I'm going to be doing Wooburg and then multicolored. So white, blue, black today, and then tomorrow we'll do red, green, and multicolored. So, and then of course after that I will be making my video for YouTube and going over the set mechanics and kind of like top commons and combat tricks to be aware of for pre-release. So if you're new here, remember to hit that follow button. I stream Monday through Friday. Strahd, thank you for the follow. Sorry I don't have my alerts on. That was 52 minutes ago. So, and I will be right back. Hey, thank you, Copacetic, for the follow. I appreciate it. All right, and we're back to continue black. And we've got things that started off here. We've got Agency Coroner, which is a 3/6 for 4 and a black. Ogre Cleric, 2 and a black. Sacrifice another creature, draw a card. If the sacrificed creature was suspected, draw 2 cards instead. All right, it's expensive for a 3/6. I mean, I guess it's about right. Big booty, very big booty. Red does not like big booties. And then it's expensive for sacrificing a creature to draw a card. The fact you can do that at instant speed is nice, and you don't have to tap is nice. So that is going to go in a deck. If the sacrificed creature was suspect to draw 2, let's see, what's going to be the thing that makes the most suspects? Black-red? Anyway, I think this is okay top end for in a deck that wants to do the attrition space, right? So probably not black-red, probably blue-black. Anyway, I think this has a space. I'm going to give this one a C. Alley Assailant, we've got a 3/3 for 2 and a black Vampire Rogue. Alley Assailant enters the battlefield tapped. And then we've got a Disguise. So if you do the Disguise, it doesn't get the ETB, right? Because it's already entered. So you can flip it into a 3/3. And then when it is turned face up, target opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. Is there anything that flips things that are disguised for free? Because that is an expensive disguise cost. And a 3/3 that enters the battlefield tapped is not great when you're getting beat down. All right, without other synergies in a vacuum, I'm going to go with this one I'm going to give this one a D. If you have some way of cheaply making this flip, then that will go up in value. But it's too expensive for what it's doing for my tastes. Barbed Servitor is a 1/1 indestructible for 3 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, suspect it. When Barbed Servitor deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. And then whenever Barbed Servitor is dealt damage, target opponent loses that much life. Ooh, Stuffy Doll. Huh. Alright, I like that. It's expensive, though. Damn it. 4? And 1/1 indestructible can be a really good blocker, and then when it... Oh, but it can't block, because it's a suspect. Right. Chippy Sticks, you're saying it feels weird to play a 3 mana for a 2/2 when I could pay 3 to have a 3/3 tapped. Which one would you prefer? Because I think I would prefer to have the 2/2 ward 2 than I would the 3/3 tapped, right? But Barbed Servitor I want this to cost like 1 or 2, and then it would be broken. Get a 1/1 menace that draws a card every time you deal damage, and then whenever it's dealt damage, target opponent loses that much life. So if you can get rid of the suspect counter, it becomes a very impressive blocker. I like this enough to play around with it. I'm going to give it a B. I don't think it's a busted bomb that's going to be like, ah, yes, I opened up Barbed Servitor, everything else is going to fall into place. But I do think like it's interesting enough to try to figure out how to make it work. Basilica Stalker is a 3/4 flyer for 5 and a black vampire detective. When Basilica Stalker deals combat damage to a player, you gain 1 life and surveil 1. And it has a disguise cost of 4 and a black. Yeah, I like that. 3/4 flyer for 5. It's kind of how I'm looking at it. That's probably the wrong way to look at it. But whenever you deal combat damage, you gain 1 life and surveil. I give this one a C. I don't think it's amazing, but I do think that it's a playable common, and especially if like you're heavily doing the disguise thing, which seems to be a theme throughout at least the first 3 colors. And now we got Case of the Gorgon's Kiss, which is an enchantment for 1 black. When this case enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target creature that was dealt damage this turn. That effect seems, tends to be okay. And then to solve 3 or more creature cards were put into graveyards from anywhere this turn. All right. Yeah, so you attack, you destroy something that was damaged. 3 creatures have gone into the graveyard, and now it becomes solved at the end of your turn. It becomes a 4/4 Gorgon creature with Death Touch and Lifelink for 1. All right. Yeah, no, I like this. I like this. I think there's enough crap in here that, like, if you're trading off your 2/2 Ward 2s against their 2/2 Ward 2s, and then you just need to get 1 more creature into the graveyard, like, I think this is going to play out okay. And then you get a 4/4 lifelink. That's going to be worth 1 mana for sure. I'm going to give that one a B. Case of the Stashed Scallion. All right, when this case enters the battle, we get 1 in a black for an enchantment. This case enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 black skeleton creature token with Suspect, which has menace and can't block. To solve, you control no suspected skeletons. Okay. So you either get rid of the suspect or you get rid of the skeleton. And then if it's solved, you can sacrifice this case to search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. Skeleton Tutor. Oh my, okay. Well, a 2/1 for 2 menace that can't block is a little bit bad if you're getting beat down. Not a great top deck either later in the game. But on turn 2, that's pretty decent. Because eventually that 2/1 skeleton creature is going to die. And then you get to tutor for your best card in your deck. Yeah, all right, I'll give this one a B. Cerebral Confiscation. We've got a 2 and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent either discards 2 cards or reveals their hand and you choose a non-land from it. That player discards that card. I like Mind Rot. To start that off with that conversation. Woodfeld, you're saying you love the flavor. It's solved when there's no skeletons in your closet. Yeah, exactly. Once the skeletons have been cleared, it's been solved. I like the flavor on that as well. Cerebral Confiscation. So I like Mind Rot, and it depends on how much of Mind Rot is. Sometimes Mind Rot is good, sometimes it's bad. And with all of the clue tokens for drawing cards, might be one of those sets where the Mind Rot's not good. I don't like the second ability of choosing a non-land specifically for 3. That seems way too expensive. But if you're doing the small game, I haven't seen anything that's strictly doing the small game strategy yet. And I've seen a fair amount of card draw and looting and such that discarding that's another thing. It fuels their collective evidence. So I'm going to give this one a D. I don't think this is going to be a good Mind Rot set. And yeah, I could be wrong. But Clandestine Meddler is a 3/2 for 2 and a black. So lots of 3/2s for 3. When Clandestine Meddler enters the battlefield, suspect up to 1 other target creature you control. Okay. Whenever one or more suspected creatures you control attack, surveil one. Okay. Vampire Rogue. So maybe Dimir is like the suspect deck, and surveil one to menace for tempo. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Maybe there's a black blue tempo deck where you use like the collective evidence to outvalue your opponent and suspect to hit with menace so that they're susceptible to the bounce spells in the format. All right, I'll give it a C. I can't give a 3-2 a B in good faith. But I think that like it's interesting. Deadly Cover Up. We've got 3 double pip black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may collect evidence 6. Destroy all creatures. Second Wrath, 1 in white, 1 in black. If evidence was collected, exile a card from an opponent's graveyard, then search its owner's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. So we kind of have like the end effect, but we also have a Wrath for 5. Yeah. Double pip. So the white one was also double pip white. This one's double pip black. I'll give this one a B. Wraths tend to be pretty good. They might lean themselves over into the A territory, but I'm gonna go with the B. Extract a Confession. We got 1 in a black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may collect evidence 6. So we've got a sorcery. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. So we've got an Edict. Evidence was collected. Instead, each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. Okay, well, edicts that destroy the greatest power among creatures are much better. We have already seen some go wide hints, and lots of cheap 2-drop detectives. So I'm not really sure that this is that great. And then, like, if they're sacrificing one of the disguised creatures, they just sacrifice the worst one. Yeah. So edicts, especially in a set that potentially has like go wide effects. I'm gonna give this one a D. Doesn't feel like it's gonna be the go tall kind of set. Fester Leech. We get a 1/1 zombie leech for 1 black. Whenever Fester Leech deals combat damage to a player, you mill 2 cards. All right. Self mill, let's go. 1 in a black. Fester Leech gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Activate only once each turn. I like this because you don't need to pump it to threaten it. So if they play out a 2/2 ward 2 on 3, Fester Leech is still threatening to blow that creature up if it blocks. So you're able to get that self mill, which you can then use to do the collective evidence thing. And so I like that a lot. The style of this set is so cool, solving mysteries and stuff. Yeah, I think the flavor is pretty on point. I like it. All right, so Fester Leech here is going to get a B from me. That might be too high, but I like it. I like a 1/1 for 1 that does stuff that I'm looking to do later in the game, and then the threaten ability, even though you can only pump it once, like is usually enough to at least get in for some early damage. Maybe B is too high. Definitely have to be mainly black for a 1-drop black card, right? It's a 1-drop. I'm gonna go with from what we've seen so far, I feel like there's stuff that you can do with your graveyard. Sticking with it, I'm gonna go with a B. Homicide Investigator. Get a 1 in a black for a 2/2. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures you control die, investigate. This ability triggers only once each turn. Right? Every time something of yours dies, it turns into a clue token, and it's a grizzly bear for 1 in a black. And detective, it's a rare. Okay. What is the clue archetype? This is going to be good in the clue archetype. I'll give this one a B. Hunted Bone Brute. We get a 2 in a black. When Hunted Bone Brute enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens. And then when Hunted Bone Brute dies, each opponent loses 3 life. You have a disguise of 1 in a black. Whoa. This is the sort of thing that you're going to want to kill your opponent's disguised creatures for and pay the ward. It's like, so turn 3, you play this out as a 2/2 ward 2 creature, and then turn 4, you flip it up as a 6/2 menace. and because it's already been in the battlefield, they don't get the 2/1/1 white dog creature tokens, and then when it dies, the opponent loses 3 life. Oh, why don't you have more than 2 HP? If this, even if this was an X3, if this was an 6/3, that's a lot of damage. All right, I'm gonna give this one an A. I don't know if there's I don't know what the X2 hate is in the set, like a shock. But as long as I'm understanding this correctly, that it doesn't trigger the ETB if you flip it over with disguise. This can hit your opponent for 6 damage out of nowhere and gives you 3 damage after it dies. You think A is too high? Well, it's single pip. It goes into a lot of decks. You could flip it up later on like turn 4, turn 5, so like you could splash this card relatively easily. So I think I'll be wanting this in a fair amount of decks, not even strictly just black decks. It doesn't win the game by itself. Well, 6 damage for 2 mana is pretty game winning. It can win, because you can remember that you can flip your disguised creature at instant speed. So let's say they're tapped out and they don't block this one, then you undisguise it, hit them for 6. Yeah, but I assume that most of the time you're gonna kind of like Cons of Tarkir. There's gonna be a lot of people playing the 2/2 ward 2s on 3. Hey, what's up, Gatekeeper? Yeah, assuming no tricks is an automatic 2 for 1. I think there's a lot of value here, and like everybody has a different system for what. If I open this up in pack 2, pick 1, and I'm not in black, I'm very tempted to pick this up and splash it. I'm gonna give it an A. Could be too high, but Menace, when it dies, loses 3 life. 9 damage for 2 mana. I know after you've paid the 3, but 9 damage for 5 mana is pretty good. It's almost half their life total. Obviously, you don't want to play this out as a 6/2 for 3 and give them the 2/1/1 tokens. But as long as you're doing the disguise thing, which I feel like a lot of the set is doing, then that works. Here we have a card that I don't know the real name of, but we'll call it Dominion Scheming. And it's a 3 and a black for an enchantment with flash. When Dominion Scheming enters the battlefield, put a counterfeit counter on each creature you control. And then whenever a creature you control with a counterfeit counter on it dies, exile it and return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is the payoff for self-mill, right? You like just mill your deck super hard with the thing like the zombie leech. Zombie leech? Zombie leech. And then when your zombie leech dies, it becomes your best milled creature. I like that. And I can't remember what rarity it is, but rarity doesn't really matter for the tier list, right? So I like this, but it's a little bit of a build around, right? So I don't think that this is just strictly an A, but I do think with the looting and everything, like this seems like a pretty appealing card to me. And as long as you've enabled your graveyard. If you have nothing in your graveyard, this does nothing. Oh, it's a rare. Thank you, Fleet Fox. Appreciate it. Hope you're having a good day. And this can be absolutely backbreaking, though. Makes everything on your board come back as whatever is the best thing in your graveyard. So as long as you can enable this, I think this is great. So I'm going to give it a B because it does need to be enabled. You also do need creatures in play. So maybe I'm too high on this. Because if you have no creatures and you have no creatures in your graveyard, this is a do-nothing enchantment. But I think there's some cool stuff you could do here. You're not a fan, Isaiah? Magic Christmas Land? Okay. Well, there's always something that I get wildly wrong, and this one could be it. Dominion Scheming could be my Chmill. Or, or I guess the anti-Chmill, because I was way down on Chmill. Yeah, I think that this is intriguing to me. But again, it'll be kind of dependent on how easy it is to self-mill. It doesn't add up is 3 double pip black for an instant, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield and put a suspect counter on it. Defossilize, but double pip black. Suspect instead of explore. Again, this is another one that like I'm gonna give it a B. But if there's no self mill in the set, then I'm gonna be lowering those. Hey, what's up, Derek the Pug? Flower Bridge. Oh, also good to point out. Yeah, defossilize was sorcery speed. This is instant speed. So because it comes in as a suspect, it cannot block. So you don't get an instant. You don't get an instant blocker. But that's why it's instant speed, right? Otherwise, they would have made defossilize. Like they're really hesitant to give you instant speed blockers. Um, but you do get an instant speed menace creature that can immediately attack your opponent the following turn, which is very aggressive, faster than defossilize. So, and maybe, you know, if you have a way of removing suspect counters, then it is an instant speed blocker. But I like this sort of thing. The double pit black is a little bit rough. Lead pipe. We've got another clue equipment here. So we've got a one swamp for clue equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. Equipment costs 2. Can sacrifice it to draw a card. Whenever equipped creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Again, I'm going to give these equipment cost 2 cards a D. They could be too low because of the investigation clue side. But unless you're really looking to draw like clues, I don't think it's enough to make me want to play this card. We're going to have this one called the Leering Onlooker, which is, I don't know what it's actually named, but we will soon. This is a 1/3 flying vampire for 1 and a black, and it has the ability to double pit black, exile Leering Onlooker from your graveyard, create 2 tapped 1/1 black bat creature tokens with flying. I like this card. This is an uncommon. It's 1/3 flyer for 2. I'm okay with. And then the fact that like late game it gives you another way to create more flyers that you do stuff with, and it's still kind of interesting, right? So I'm gonna give this one a B. I don't think it's anything like super spectacular, but I do think that like it's gonna be decent enough. And it's also notably, if you do self mill it, it gives you some value of it just being in your graveyard, even if you can't return it or anything, right? So it works better the more that you're doing the self mill thing, which I think black is kind of doing. And we've got Long Goodbye, which is an instant for 1 and a black. The spell can't be countered, which is important for the wards. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. So this is good. This is great. The disguised creatures, I believe, have mana value 3 or less, right? Like if they instant speed flip it up, then it has the mana value of whatever it flips up into, right? So that was a bad, like, have to kind of see what the disguise costs are on that. Like it can potentially get blown out by them flipping it into something that has mana value 4 or more. But still cheap removal, gets through the ward, easy B for me. And then we've got Macabre Resurrection or Reconstruction, and the spell costs. So we got 3 and a black for a sorcery. The spell costs 2 less to cast if a creature card was put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So we get a double raise dead for 1 and a black, and I tend to undervalue the turn stuff from your graveyard to your hand. Again, if you have the really good like self mill and you're able to mill to your bombs and then draw those bombs into your hand, a 2-cost divination that hits specifically creatures that you want is pretty decent. So I'm going to give this one a C. The fact that it costs 1 more than another chance, like you kind of need a way to enable it with your stuff dying, but your suspect, I think, can be kind of aggressive, and with the menace, maybe you're going to be trading, and we'll see. But I'm going to go with that. Sims, this one, if they flip in response, so if you go to kill a disguised creature and they flip it in response into something that's mana value 3 or more, it kills the spell. But if they're tapped out and they can't like flip it in response, then you are getting to destroy the disguised creatures, which are going to be pretty good. So you think it's an A? I'm not sure I'm going to go to an A on that, but it's pretty tempting. It's definitely going to be really good removal, right? Yeah. So this one I'm going to give a C. I think that there's decks that are going to want to do the reconstruction. Massacre Girl, known killer. And we've got a 4/4 for 2 double pit black with menace. Creatures you control have wither. They deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. So those become like the damage becomes permanent. And then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. So I like that, right? You got a 4/4 menace, which is already really aggressive, and then as your opponent's stuff trades off, the damage becomes permanent, and you draw cards as your opponent's creatures die. So I'm fine with that. This is how you get rid of disguise on turn 3 right here. Massacre Girl. Um, no, it's a fair point, Sims. Because of the ward, you're not able to affect the disguise creatures on turn 3. But I think this one's a bomb. I think I'm going to give it a B as well because it does have the double pit black, and so it's a little bit restrictive. It doesn't go into every single deck, but I'll give that one a B. And then, wait, I went backwards. Murder! All right, we got an instant speed, destroy target creature for 1 double pit black. Too bad everything has ward 2. But once they've undisguised it, then you get to kill that thing, and murder tends to be amazing. So I'll give this one a B. It is restrictive to mostly black decks because of the double pit black. And we've got Night Drinker Moroi. Is a vampire for flying 4/2 for 3 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, you lose 3 life. But it has disguise for double pit black. So we're seeing this again, negative ETB effects that have decent disguise options. So we were talking about the bounce effect when things have good ETBs. This is nice because like this means that if they undisguise it, they have to play it out again for its disguise cost and then undisguise it again unless they want to do the 3 life. So like we're seeing some things in black that are kind of not great to see bounced after they're undisguised and the ward goes away. So just something that, you know, standing out to me that maybe the brackish blunder and the unlucky drop effect in blue could be matched up well against at least some of the black cards. And wait, so I didn't give that a grade, but I think this is great. We get a 4/2 flyer with a cheap disguise, so it's got some drawbacks though. So I think I'm gonna give this one a C. I think it goes up if the more that you're doing the disguise strategy. Outrageous Robbery. Get X double pit black. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast it. Interesting. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons why it can't be too high on this, is because it dies to X2 hate. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down permanently. It's not until end of turn. So and it also like, okay, so maybe there is a little bit of a mill strategy, right? Tap this for 7, it's mill 5. It's not amazing. But it does give you like late game dig as well. So it's like mill your opponent, but also find playables. I don't know. So it's a very attrition, it's a very attrition-y card. Very controlling card. Yeah, you can have multiple creatures suspected. Um, hmm. Yes, KF Miner, I did. I did cover the blue bird that steals cards back, so you can watch the VOD and go back to look at the discussion on the bird. And but in general, like I think it's interesting, like card draw with the disguise. Like I think it could do some cool stuff. Outrageous Robbery. I'm having a hard time figuring out. It's really slow, and I don't think you're going to be winning through mill unless you're up against unless the self mill is really strong. Gives you better dig as long as the game's going along. It's just not my style of play. It's double pit black draw X basically, but with more of a self mill kind of vibe attached to it. I'm gonna give this one a C. And I definitely don't think it's a bad card. Like I do think that it's gonna make its way into like Sam Black is gonna destroy somebody with this, right? This is not what I typically am drawn to. Persuasive Interrogators, we get a 5/6 for 4 double pit black. Gorgon Detective, when it enters the battlefield, investigate. Got it, KF Miner. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. What? And we can make the clues cost like nothing? And then you just have to pop 5 clues and you win the game? Copacetic X black black draw X cards sounds amazing. Yeah, I'm having a hard time drawing up from your opponent's deck. It's very good in an attrition deck for sure. I don't know. C might be too low, but black doesn't always want to be playing attrition, especially with all the suspect counters and everything, right? So like the more that you're doing in a controlling archetype, then the better I like it. And it is notable that it exiles, so they don't even get to use it for like collecting evidence or anything. So it's pretty good for an attrition deck. Persuasive Interrogators, we get a 5/6 for 6, which is a decent body, and then it comes with a clue token, which is good. And then whenever you sacrifice a clue token, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. I like this. I think that even if it was just by itself, like it's doing enough with a 5/6 for 6 that then draws a card for 2 more mana the following turn. And we know that there's like clue synergies and detective synergies. So I'm giving this one a B. Just because of the double pit black, and yeah, I don't think it's gonna be like the mythic level uncommon or anything. Polygraph Orb is a 4 and a black for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 2 life. Okay, for 5, man. Okay. 2 colorless and tap it, collect evidence 3. Each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card or sacrifice a creature. Huh. Okay. Well, this is one of those that like enables you the self mill. Lose 2 life. It costs 5. It's very expensive. So I can't really. I mean, it felt like there was plenty of 2-drop creatures that it didn't feel like it was just like going to be like Cons of Tarkir where everything was a disguise creature, and like, so I don't think it's going to be common to just start play on turn 3. I think this is too expensive for what it's doing. Yeah, I'm gonna give this one a D. This isn't doing it for me. All right, we've got Presumed Dead, which is 1 and a black for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control and suspect it. All right, so I'm gonna give this one a D. The issue that I have with this kind of card is it gets 2 for 1, right? Like if you go to put it on something and then they remove it, then you get 2 cards for 1. The other issue though is that like suspect is a drawback, not necessarily a good thing. So like if you need to be able to block, you being able to bring it back but not be able to block with it is a problem, right? So I don't know. I don't like this, and I'm surprised they put it at uncommon. Maybe it's because of the instant speed +2/+0. This is one of those that like I feel like if you're the beatdown, it's fine. But yeah, it's kind of like the play versus draw. You really want to be on the play with this card, right? So yeah, I'm gonna go with a D. I don't like to see that at uncommon. Repeat Offender is a 2/1 human assassin for 1 and a black with a mana sink for 2 and a black. If Repeat Offender is suspected, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Otherwise, suspect it. So notably, you can do that multiple times. A 2/1 for 2 with a mana sink later. Figure out a way to suspect it. Maybe it gets a little bit better. I mean, you're going to want 2-drop creatures if you're doing an aggressive strategy with the suspect deck, but I think outside of that situation, this is a D for me. I'd rather have a 2/2 Grizzly Bear instead of a 2/1, especially with cards like Leech, that like the zombie Leech that might be playable as a 1-drop for 1, a 1/1 for 1. Just a little hesitant about this one, and but you know, like late game, maybe D is a little bit too low. Rot Farm Mortipede. We got ourselves a 3/4 insect for 3 and a black. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, Rot Farm Mortipede gets +1/+0 and gains menace and lifelink until end of turn. Oh baby. Okay, well this is the payoff to self mill. First activation doesn't get a counter, right? But it does give it menace at least, and then it starts growing. it makes me kind of feel like the 1/1 that could trigger an explore for 3, right? This feels kind of unimpressive. Rot Farm Mortipede though is like the payoff to the self mill. Because if you use a creature card from your graveyard or reanimate it, right? If your creature is leaving your graveyard because it's suddenly becoming a creature on the battlefield, this is fine. And then you get a 4/4 Menace Lifelinker for 4. Give it to me. All right, I'm probably too high on this archetype in general because of needing the graveyard activation before it actually becomes good. But I'm gonna give this one a B. I think this is one of the one of the commons I've been more excited about here, and it's probably too high. Slice from the Shadows. We got X and a black for an instant. The spell can't be countered. Target creature gets -X until end of turn. Sure. Heat Ray, but like get through the ward. Tends to trade down in value because if you pay 5 mana, you can only kill something with 4 toughness. But we've seen kind of a theme throughout the set of creatures that have a higher power and a lower toughness. We've also seen the vice versa though. We've seen low toughness or low power, high toughness. But a lot of them have been kind of fragile, right? So it kind of depends on how much of this will actually hit. But I'm gonna give this one a C. I think this is like it's removal, but it's not like I think there's better removal. It's nice to see it at common though. And then it does get around indestructible because it is -X. So that's kind of nice too. And then we've got 2 leeches for the price of 1, which is definitely not the actual name of the card, right? But it's a 2/4 leech for 3 in the black. At the beginning of your combat, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control with power 2 or less gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. So it's kind of like a 3/4 Death Toucher, but only when you're attacking. And like you can make other things into better attackers, which works relatively well with the suspect mechanic with the menace. So if you have a whole bunch of suspect little 2/1s, they become a lot harder to block. Multiple blocks become even worse because of the death touch, right? So gonna eat gonna eat me some leeches. Leeches for free, leeches for me. Yeah. Um there's a deck that's gonna want this. I don't think it's gonna be most decks. So I'm gonna give this one a D. 2/4 is a nice defensive stat block, but the problem is the +1/+0 and death touch is something you would rather be aggressive with, right? Because it's only on your attacks. So D, but I think it in specifically the suspect deck is probably a more playable card. Snarling Gorehound, we got a 1/1 black 1/1 dog for 1 black, and it's 1/1 menace. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, surveil 1. So this is kind of one of those, it's like it's an enabler, right? So we got another power 2 or less. I don't think we saw a whole lot of power 2 or less text in blue. Gonna have to go back and kind of look at that theme because there's definitely one of these running through the set. But Surveil 1 helps you enable your self mill, which black seems to have some payoffs for. And a 1/1 menace gets in okay at the beginning, so I think it works well in the suspect deck too. So I'm gonna give this one a C. Maybe I'm going too highly on 1-drops after our experience with Lost Caverns of Ixalan. But I think it's doing the thing that I want a 1-drop to do. Not really great to top deck though, right? We've got Soul Innervation, which is an enchantment flash for 3 in the black. When Soul Innervation enters the battlefield, target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So there's like kind of a collect evidence, recycle your graveyard, whether or not you're using it for evidence or reanimating. That this would at least do something later. And then it's removal when you play it. Not great removal because of the ward in the set. You'd have to pay 6 to give something -4/-4. So I'm gonna give this one a C. Got the Presidents of the United States reference there? Nice. All right, Toxin Analysis. We've got instant for 1 black. Target creature gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. Investigate. Well, it's sort of card neutral. Death Touch and Lifelink is okay. All right, I'll give this one a C. Again, because it can get 2 for 1 by instant speed removal, but being able to, like Death Touch and draw a card tends to be a card that, like, at least I'm interested in seeing how it plays, especially if there's big green creatures with trample. Giving them Death Touch and Lifelink at instant speed is always a fun time. Wait, go back again. Sorry. Undercity Eliminator. We've got a 3/3 for 3 double pit black for a Gorgon Assassin. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact or creature. When you do, exile target creature and opponent controls. Well, that's pretty good. Yeah, the other thing too is I like 1-cost combat tricks more than I like 4-cost combat tricks, right? So this is a pretty good one. Undercity Eliminator is removal, but you have to sacrifice something, and the more that you have something that's worth sacrificing, then the better it is. But you do get to just straight up remove something. You will have to pay the ward, though, on a disguised creature. So still, it's a 2 for 1 as long as, like, it might be a C. Usually the sort of thing that removes creatures on ETB is just an instant B. But you do have to sacrifice something. I'm going to give this a C. I think that I'm going to be a little bit low on this one because of the disguise mechanic having ward and the fact that you have to sacrifice something of your own for it to be a 2 for 1. But with an asterisk or with a note that it might be too low. Unscrupulous Agent is a 1/1 for 1 and a black. It's an elf detective. It enters the battlefield. Target opponent exiles a card from their hand. Okay, so similar to the Mind Rot sort of thing. Like, so we saw this with the virus beetle or whatever, right? In Neon Dynasty. The reason why that was so good in Neon Dynasty was because of ninjutsu and being able to play it multiple times. So if you have a way of blinking this effect, which we've seen, right, where there was the elephant at rare and white, if you can blink this and get it to trigger multiple times, then it's good. Yeah, we just saw Skullcap Snail. That was really good to bring back with the another chance, and notably, Skullcap Snail didn't work very well unless you were in a go small archetype, right? So, like in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, it was best in the Rakdos and the Orsov kind of like attrition decks. So, the more that you're attacking your opponent's resources and trading 1 for 1, the better. Blue tokens are a little bit of an issue with any of the go small strategies. Anything that lends itself to drawing cards is not great to see. So I'm going to start low on this and give this a D. And if it turns out to be a go small deck, then I'll be higher up on this. And then we got Vein Ripper, and Vein Ripper is 3 triple pip black, but you get a 6/5 flying vampire assassin with ward, sacrifice a creature, and whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. All right. Well, too bad it's triple pip black, right? But whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life is Blood Artist on steroids, right? Blood Artist was amazing just for losing 1 life and gaining 1 life. So if you have anything that can like sacrifice creatures and you sacrifice a whole bunch of little 1/1s, this can just win you the game. I haven't seen an enabler for that yet, at least off the top of my head. I know that there was the 2 and a black to sacrifice to draw a card, or draw 2 if the creature was a suspect, but that's really expensive to do a whole bunch of sacrifices in 1 turn. But still, a 6/5 flyer with ward, sacrifice a creature, is a pretty good threat. Problem is the triple pip black. So, because of the triple pip black, I'm going to give this a C. I think if you are in black, then fine, go for it. But like, it's going to be kind of hard to pivot and be like, yes, get in here when I have no other good black cards. And without a repetitive sack outlet, I'm not sure I'm super stoked about it. Maybe C is too low. But the I'm just low on triple pip black. So if you're mono black, then this goes up. But that's going to bring it to the end for me. Thank you everybody for hanging out. Copacetic, thank you for the follow and welcome to my community. Same with you, Strahd. And I'll be on tomorrow to do some more of this first impressions. These are my first time reading the cards, so like I put together the slideshow but didn't read everything very deeply. And you gave me an A? Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And if draft is your thing and you would rather see drafts, don't worry, I'll be back to drafting on Monday. And if you are interested in what the final verdict of this is all going to look like, you can check it out on YouTube. I'll be posting the edited VOD there. And for some reason, I didn't do my bot today, so got to type it out manually. But yeah, I'll be on tomorrow to continue part 2 of this set review, and then it'll all be available on YouTube, as well as my pre-release guide for what I think, at least how I will be approaching the pre-release. So thank you as always for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate the support, and have a wonderful evening, and I will catch you all tomorrow. On that